You boys be quiet down there!
Welcome back to Neo Geo Generation. We're going through the entire Neo Geo library in order of product code, and this time we'll be looking at Football Frenzy, NGH-034, 1992 from SNK. The game weighs in at 48 megs. Football Frenzy isn't SNK's first American football game. It's preceded by 1987's Touchdown Fever in arcades, followed by Touchdown Fever 2 in 1988, which is mostly more of the same, except with more voices and the ability to choose offensive plays. SNK also released a Famicom version of Touchdown Fever in 1988, which didn't make it out to the North American NES until 1991. And well, in the pantheon of NES sports games, it's no baseball stars. Considering when they were made, it's not surprising that the Touchdown Fever games are quite simple and bare bones. It seems the team at SNK went back to the drawing board when making Football Frenzy and didn't pull much, if any, inspiration from these older titles. That said, Football Frenzy is an arcade-style game that's nowhere near a simulation. Per the manual, the game of football has been simplified here for an arcade-style experience, perhaps best compared to fan-favorite Tecmo Bowl. But how does Football Frenzy hold up compared to that classic? Tecmo Bowl did start out as an arcade game in 1987, and the original NES version released in 1989 became a classic. Given Tecmo Bowl's arcade lineage, does Football Frenzy succeed at carrying the same torch? It's hard not to conclude that SNK was just checking all the boxes here, filling out the Neo Geo's lineup, and this time specifically targeting American players. Well, one can assume, based on the level of enthusiasm for this sport outside of the US. The Japanese Neo Geo CD manual even has a section explaining how to play football, and lucky for us, it even got translated in the English manual. Poorly. Look, the game's official logo always displayed on the field is even a bald eagle. And the 50-yard line is what else but red, white, and blue. By the way, I wish I could say that Football Frenzy wasn't the only American football game for Neo Geo. 4 years after this release, Tecmo released their one and only game for Neo Geo, but it was a soccer game. What a missed opportunity. Don't you think Neo Tecmo Bowl would have killed? Come on, Tecmo. Give the people what they want. As usual, today we'll be looking at this game on my MVS cart. Interesting story about this one, it was actually given to me for free. Back around 2000, DNR Games in California was having an MVS game sale and reached out to me for advertising on my website. In exchange, they offered me my choice of game from their inventory. Football Frenzy is actually a cheap, common MVS cart these days, but back then it seemed like one of the less common ones, so I picked this one. This went down as the one and only time I was ever given any kind of payment for anything on my Neo Geo site, other than displaying banner ads. The cart must have come with these color instruction sheets, and I'm not sure where I got this Japanese mini marquee from. Thanks, DNR Games! Football Frenzy's lead designer was Tomomi M, who was the main designer of King of the Monsters, and also worked on Street Smart and Prehistoric Isle. Additionally, the game shares a main programmer with King of the Monsters, known only as Makoto. This intro here is slightly longer if the game is running in home mode. On an AES, you'll see these images of a cheerleader and players first, whereas MVS mode jumps straight to the title screen. Why couldn't they have shown that in arcades? Although one thing the MVS does have going for it is this song that plays when you insert a coin, which is basically an extended version of the intro and title screen music. Although the Tecmo Bowl games did feature licensed teams, it will probably come as no surprise that there are no licensed teams here in Football Frenzy. You can choose from 10 fictional teams instead.
Duck Dry has won the Duck Bowl.
They wanted it more.
Teams like the Hitmen. You clearly don't want to mess with them. Their logo is a gun pointed directly in your face. And what could be more American than that? Imagine the fans wearing the team's official logo jerseys. I wouldn't mind having one of those. Or choose the Bullets. I think I'm starting to see a running theme here. The teams each have their own strengths and weaknesses, but you can't go wrong picking any of them. The tournament consists of a bracket in which 8 of the 10 possible teams face off. This amounts to one playthrough consisting of 3 games. Which team will win the SNK Super Bowl and be crowned champion?
My favorite team's in it.
The Wolves.
Yeah, ever since I was a boy, I've always loved.
The Wolves.
Yeah, they're good, but I wouldn't count out
The Scuds.
Yeah, I hear that President
Billy Kahn.
is going to be watching with his wife.
The Gun Hada.
In both AES and MVS mode, the default setting is 3 minutes per quarter. However, while the AES uses real-world seconds, in MVS mode the seconds tick by twice as fast as real life, so games finish much faster while playing in MVS mode. In AES mode, each game takes about 30 minutes to play through on the default setting, so a full tournament will take about 90 minutes before you see the end credits. While playing in MVS mode, you must continue at the end of each quarter, so players in the arcade would drop 4 coins per game, or more depending on how the operator set up the machine. In both AES and MVS modes, if you have a memory card inserted, you will be given the option to save at the end of each quarter, though the AES won't ask you to continue. Also, on both MVS and AES, if you choose to save between quarters, the game will go to a game over screen, and if you wish to continue, you'll have to start the game again and load. It is a bit annoying if you're trying to play it safe and save the game between each quarter, similarly to how Neo Geo baseball games autosave between innings, but I suppose it makes sense that the game designers didn't want you to do this, and instead you were only meant to save at the end of each play session. At any rate, it's not difficult at all to just save and then load your game. While on defense, press A to tackle or block. B allows you to switch to a player closer to the ball. While on offense, press A to hike the ball and begin. B, C, and D are used for choosing which player to pass to. Football Frenzy becomes a button masher while on offense. Tap A to make your player run faster. You will also need to mash A to build up power while kicking. You can also wiggle the joystick to break tackles. This is what I call controller abuse. In one-player mode, your team will always receive first, but in two-player mode, there's a coin toss to determine who will kick off. In general, scoring isn't difficult in Football Frenzy. In fact, by the way, it isn't as hard as you'd think to get your score up to 99, where it will get stuck and won't go up any higher. Of course, there's a little celebration sequence whenever there's a touchdown or any kind of score. The scoring team is, celebrating with some good old-fashioned roughhousing or something, I guess, and the other team gets a headache.
It's giving me a headache.
Here, take 2 of these.
Ah, new print. Little, yellow, different.
In Tecmo Bowl, players move pretty darn fast, whereas the pace of movement feels a touch more realistic in Football Frenzy. After a touchdown, the game gives you a choice of a kick or a 2-point conversion. Time for the extra point, oh yeah, it's time to go. Here we go, time for the extra point, oh yeah, why don't you know? Time to go. I apologize for this song. It's for real. It's gonna be good. Here we go. Oh yeah. It's interesting that the 2-point conversion is here, because although 2-point conversions have existed in college football and the AFL since 1958, the NFL didn't add the option to their rules until 1994, 2 years after this game's release. The 2-point conversion is rather easy to pull off in this game, so I suggest going for it. Should you choose to kick a field goal instead, you can't aim the ball or anything, so all you really have to do is mash the A button to kick the ball hard enough.
The kick is up. It's looking good. The ball is turning into a fat, bald guy. And it's no good.
A football game wouldn't be complete without a halftime show. Just a note, if you choose to save the memory card at the end of the second quarter, you won't get to see the halftime show when you load the game. You'd think this bulldog must be your team's mascot, but no. In the first and third games of the tournament, it's a bulldog, but in the second game, it's an alligator. The cheerleaders' dances and the color of their outfits change too. The shows all have this same weird campy music, which sounds like a rejected Sonic the Hedgehog bonus stage or something. And they all end with that same cheerleader's face covering the screen. Look, SNK knew what Americans want, okay? After winning the game, of course you'll move on to the next bracket in the tournament. Do I want to see how the game is progressing? Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to take a quick peek in on the action. Oh wait, you mean I have to watch the whole game with the computer just playing against itself? And once I've started, there's no way to skip it? Just like in Baseball Stars Professional, you have the option to watch the other games in the tournament that your team is not involved in, but only while playing in AES mode. I said it once and I'll say it again. If you have the time for this level of detail, maybe you paid a lot for the game back when it was new, then more power to you.
I know how you feel, Bart. When I was your age, I wanted an electric football game more than anything in the world. And my parents bought it for me, and it was the happiest day of my life. Well, good night.
The game doesn't seem to get harder as you progress, so select your difficulty at the start and expect it to remain steady throughout. The MVS difficulty setting is really not hard in this game. One thing that does change as you progress is the plays that are added to your menus in each subsequent game. While on offense, you can choose from several running, passing, and kicking plays, but the defending team can't choose a play and just has to do whatever. Obviously, there aren't many plays available compared to football sims like Madden, but it's still a decent selection for an arcade-style game. The strong side play seems to be an all-around good choice of a running play against the CPU in this game. Just wait a moment for your opening and then go. Passing plays tend to be very easy against the CPU. They don't do a good job of blocking you, so passes are successful more often than not, and will likely result in a first down. Just be aware that when passing, you will need to stop moving so that the receiving player stays in the right place to catch the ball. The thing that kind of sucks is that unlike in Tecmo Bowl, you can always see what play your opponent is selecting, even when playing against the CPU. I guess they did this to make it more user-friendly for arcade players than the cryptic button combinations of the NES Tecmo Bowl. The arcade version of Tecmo Bowl didn't have any place to select at all. The graphics certainly aren't amazing in Football Frenzy, but they're not bad either. In general, compared with more realistic football titles, you get large sprites and bold, bright colors. Your view of the action has two possible zoom levels. You'll get a zoomed-in view for running plays. By the way, the graphics don't actually scale in zoom. There are separate sprite sets for the two zoom levels, which is a good thing considering how pixelated it would probably get if the graphics were actually zoomed. The zoomed-in view looks nice and detailed, even though all the players are number 88. But of course the drawback is it limits the scope of your view of the action. Hey, having two sets of sprites for the players, that's what I call bigger, badder, better. It's a minor nitpick, but the presentation is a bit drab in these menus, don't you think? You see the same bland Football Frenzy wallpaper both when choosing plays during games and between games. Contrast this with the interface in Baseball Stars 2, which is trying too hard to be flashy. The soundtrack in Football Frenzy was created by our familiar friends Tate Norio and Yoshihiko Kitamura, credited as Jojoha Kitapi. The soundtrack in Football Frenzy rocks.
Ready, break!
There are four main themes that play during the game, depending on the quarter, and all four are really great.
It's a fumble! The Hitmen have the ball back.
Okay, fine, the fourth quarter one is the weakest.
Ready, break!
It would seem that 4 became the standard amount of main music themes that SNK would allot to each of their sports titles. Since it's just a football game, and considering the lackluster quality of some of the soundtracks we've looked at so far, the music here is way better than it has any right to be.
This game is underway. Ready, break!
They must have just told the composers to make the music as exciting as possible, perhaps to make the often repetitive gameplay seem less dull. For my money, this is a Neo Geo soundtrack that can be enjoyed even when not playing the game. Tecmo Bowl, and especially Tecmo Super Bowl, had great music for NES sports games. In general, Tecmo made good music on the NES. To make things fair, let's even consider 1993's Tecmo Super Bowl on the SNES. All those games have good music, but I have to say that Football Frenzy more than holds its own. And I much prefer how the music doesn't stop and start between plays like it does in the Tecmo Bowl games. Now let's take a look at Football Frenzy on the Neo Geo CD. The whole game loads up in 48 seconds on a single-speed system, and 27 seconds on a CDZ. The game never needs to load again. It will probably come as no surprise that being a less popular, older sports title, the CD version has no new arranged soundtrack for the CD. It's just a recording of the cartridge music. The cartridge game is all here intact exactly as you would expect, so there's nothing to point out except a couple of small issues. First, the music on track 5 of the CD has an error in it.
First down.
And it's not just my disc skipping due to a scratch. The discs were all printed like this from SNK. This points to a lack of quality control. Moving on to the game itself then, unlike in some Neo Geo CD games where the game pauses and forces you to wait for the CD drive to access the music, Football Frenzy fortunately doesn't make you wait. Perhaps they wisely opted to keep the fast pace of the game intact. Unfortunately, this causes the music cues to come in late as the game plows ahead. For example, when you score, the music actually gets cut off due to starting late and not finishing on time.
Touchdown! All right!
It sounds really strange when you're used to hearing the full jingle complete in the cartridge version.
Touchdown! Outstanding!
Worse though, this problem actually kind of impacts the gameplay when your team is kicking. In the cartridge version, the main BGM starting is the only signal you're given that it's time to start mashing the A button to kick. However, in the CD version, the music starts late, so it can be even harder to tell it's time to start mashing A. Perhaps it's just because I'm used to the cartridge version, but it's a little distracting. So it's a minor nitpick, and I wouldn't let it keep you from picking up the Neo Geo CD version. Critics are mixed on Football Frenzy, and fan consensus has branded Football Frenzy mediocre. The game's main shortcoming is that it's too simple. It would be nice if it had more moves than one button for both block and tackle. On the other hand, the simplicity of the game is its strong suit. After all, the same arcade-style approach to design informs the best sports titles on the Neo Geo, as well as Tecmo Bowl. It hasn't been oversimplified to the absurd degree of an older game like 10-Yard Fight on the NES or Great Football on the Sega Master System, where you only play offense in one-player mode. Although Football Frenzy is disappointing on some levels, I can't help but still like it for its music and fast-paced pick-up-and-play design, which is still fun for 1 or 2 players. Thanks for watching. Next time we'll be looking at another unreleased game, NGH-035, Mystic Wand. What happened to this game, and will we ever see another trace of it in the future? We'll look at everything we know about this missing Neo Geo game, so make sure you join me. In the meantime, please like, comment, and subscribe. This is Neo Alec signing off.